We're going to talk about plant intelligence. And the reason why plant intelligence is important is because the way that we can structure intelligence in our framework of reality is going to determine what we view as intelligence. And up until now, we've been viewing the human being and the human experience as the height of intelligence. It's almost like evolution has evolved to the point where we are right now, and we are at the pinnacle of life. We're at the pinnacle of civilization. And that place seems accurate if we have an understanding of intelligence and life only from the framework of the human being. But if we can extend it out into other species and we can see that, maybe the trees are thinking, maybe the plants are creating schemes to enhance their survival and maybe even having fun with each other. If we can start looking at the plants and trees as intelligent as we are, and perhaps maybe even more intelligent than we are because they've been doing it for a lot longer than we have, then we can expand what consciousness, what life is, what life forms are. Maybe, just maybe, extend this unified consciousness, because it's hard to imagine the earth as being consciously aware. It's hard to imagine the earth is making decisions. It's hard to imagine the earth is having an agenda or whatever is beyond the earth, the whole of everything, because what we imagine as life has a brain. And that brain is what we look for when we look for life. Even when we clearly see that other species, other things are thinking, they're making choices, they're changing their chemical composition based on the environment, we still are looking for a brain and saying, no, the brain is the sign of the height of intelligence. And so if it doesn't have a brain, it must not be able to think like we think. Even though when we look at our own brain, there's nothing in our brain that is us. We can't say like, this is the part of the brain that is us. It's the collection of neurons that all operate together to give us a sense of self, to give us a sense of spaciousness, to give us a sense of time, to give us a sense of vision, which is all an interpretation of self. Dude, hey, just showed up, ready to hear and participate and furthermore listen. So what we're talking about is plants, plant intelligence. So if you guys have any examples or questions on that, definitely drop them in the chat. Everything has consciousness, just at a different level. Yeah, that's what I was taught in elementary school. I remember the way that it was taught to me was like, oh, the natives that we kicked off this land used to believe that everything is conscious and everything is aware. And before they harvested animals or before they harvested plants, they would say a prayer because they believed that everything was aware. Silly natives. We killed those savages and took their land because they didn't really know what was going on. That was how it was propositioned to me in elementary school, is that those who believe in awareness of other things besides humans are silly Neanderthal type creatures. Okay. So we know, so here's some books. I'll give you guys some books right away. So there's, what's it called? Light Eaters? I think it's called Light Eaters. There's Braiding Sweetgrass, which has a lot of, so Light Eaters is pretty up to date about plant intelligence. And it actually references a lot of these other books. Braiding Sweetgrass is about native, I don't even know if that word is politically correct. Indigenous tribes of the lands of North America mostly, and how they viewed life outside of us, how they viewed the land. And that has some really cool lessons. Like if they were foraging for food and they came up to a plant that had a bunch of food, they would never take from basically like the culture is that they don't take from the first plant they come up to. And then when they do come up to the second plant that has the fruit or the food, they're going to take less than half, because that's how you can be in a positive symbiotic relationship with your environment if you're not raping and pillaging the very things that are giving you the life force energy. The Hidden Life of Trees, which is, I forget the author's names, but you guys will find these. The Hidden Life of Trees is awesome. That author is in Europe, I believe. So that was a lot of that content is based from that perspective on that side of the world and using those trees. And then there's The Secret Teachings of Plants, which is amazing. Why can't I remember these authors? It's because I'm trying to remember the books. The authors are just like leaving me. And then, so The Secret Teachings of Plants has the same author as this, Stephen Herod Buhner. This guy, as an author, is probably one of my favorite authors. I've read 4 of his books. They're thick books. I always talk about this one. This one's probably one of my favorites. Plant Intelligence and the Imaginal Realm into the Dreaming of Earth. I've got it highlighted a whole bunch of times. And so a lot of his books have to do with the similarities of plants and humans. So he also wrote The Secret Teachings of Plants, which I would recommend to do before this one. It's a prerequisite before this one. And Plant Intelligence and the Imaginal Realm it should be, I would invite everybody to have a goal to read those 2 books because they're a main. So it's actually a different title. Beyond the Doors of Perception is the pre of the title. Beyond the Doors of Perception, Plant Intelligence and the Imaginal Realm into the Dreaming of Earth. And I keep on repeating the title because it's actually one of my favorite titles. I bought this book just based on the title. There's another book called Tree Talk, which is a little bit weird. It's somebody channeling the consciousness of the trees. And that book speaks a lot about how trees view us. And from what I remember of that book is that the trees are similar to libraries, and they're very wise, and they're record keepers of the lands. And they desire fully to communicate with us. And it saddens them a little bit that we walk by on our devices completely preoccupied with the little lives that we're living, because there's so much more for them to tell us if we just asked. Just reading some comments here. Eric saying, and he looks like he's replying to somebody else, but he's saying he does not understand that what we get from nature, from trees and plants, is the best for us humans. Everything is frequency. Not sure who he was replying to. Will you answer questions? Yes, I am, but I'm going to have to scroll through. The second book somebody's asking, what was the second book? The Hidden Life of Trees, I believe. Beyond the Branches of what? Beyond the Doors of Perception. I think I need the tree book, having some things going on with trees around me. I live in a very wooded area and I need to know to connect more with the trees on my property. Great. So back to us and what we view as conscious. So I was talking about the brain, right? And I studied braiding sweetgrass. Sorry, I'm answering questions. Braiding Sweetgrass is the book that has a lot of the indigenous teachings. One-sided gyno advice. So right now we're on the topic of plants. I don't have much for that except for do the fascial maneuvers from Human Garage to completely open up the channels of the body so that your body can start communicating as one complete organism. Rather than trying to fix problems, it's best to look at how can we exaggerate or expand health? How can we get the most flow of vital energy through the body? The whole thing with fixing problems is, that's just a program that we focus on. But the problems exist because there's a break in the whole system. So the answer is to get the whole system back to functioning. And it seems super simple. It definitely is. It's not so easy, though, when you look at what's going on in our environment, and we're getting sprayed and we're getting poisoned in our food supply. We're getting programmed in schools. We're getting pushed into doctors that have their own agenda. So there's a lot of unprogramming that we need in order to fulfill our actual programming. I have a collection of trees. Jess is saying it's all driftwood, and it seems they all have a different story. So it sounds like she's talking about a collection of trees in driftwood, which is interesting because we're talking about a tree that's been fallen and it's still carrying the codes of intelligence. This is devastating to be cutting down all the trees. Yeah, it's crazy. When you fly over middle America and you just see all the farmland and you see one tree out of like your entire 30, 40,000 bird's eye view. At least in Europe, they do things a little bit better. And every plot of farm, you can see that every single one has a line of trees around it, which tells me that they understand regenerative farming practices at least a little bit more than we do in North America, because part of regenerative farming is you don't till the soil, because if you break up the soil, you're breaking up the fungus, the mycelium networks, you're breaking up the microorganisms that are helping facilitate balanced ecosystem. There's biofilm, which are essentially bacteria, microorganisms that run through the soil. And if you're constantly breaking that up, you're going to need to then fertilize. And also, if you start giving plants too good of an environment, like fertilization, by feeding it the perfectly high nutritious chemicals that's supposed to make it grow, it stops developing its own natural defenses. And then also, if you have it monocultured, where it's just one type of plant, it also stops the plants from developing its own defenses, which we're actually going to talk about, because the defense mechanism in plant is a sign of intelligence. So one of the defense mechanisms that are really cool is that some plants, if they start getting chewed on by, like, let's say a caterpillar, it's going to determine the exact species of caterpillar and then create the exact volatile chemical. Volatile mean aromatic. It basically goes into the air. It's going to create the exact aromatic chemical that's going to go into the air and attract the exact type of wasp, parasitic wasp, that's going to come and inject the caterpillars with its eggs. And then those wasp eggs are going to hatch, and the babies are then going to eat the caterpillars and kill them off of the tree. Is it a tree? I'm trying to think the name of it, but I can't. So that's a sign of intelligence. You put a different caterpillar on it, it's going to make a different chemical that goes into the air that's going to attract the type of wasp that targets that type of caterpillar. There's also plants whose flowers, speaking of wasp, whose flowers are shaped like the wasp that it uses pollinate the flowers. So the wasp is going to go grab the flower like it's a female wasp. And instead of grabbing a female and mating, it's just going in and grabbing onto the flower, and it's trying to basically pull the female wasp away from whatever it's standing on, but it's actually the flower itself. And it's going to get some pollen on it, and it's going to go to the next flower, and it's going to pollinate it. There's so much that we're just learning as a human species about how insects and plants and animals and even us, what we are. We feel and we're taught that there's all there is to know. And if you start looking at the history of things like physics or medicine, we're always at that point where we feel like, so even 400 years ago, we're at a point where the scientists of the day, the main ones, are holding on to their truths as if they were, that's all there is to know. Why do we do that? Because we're humans. we don't like the younger scientists coming up and saying like, actually, I just opened a door proving that everything that we thought existed a certain way doesn't exist that way. So they get essentially a lot of weight thrown on them. They have to spend a lot of their career fighting out of it. China, USA, India, and a few others reject Europe's farming ways. Yeah, the regenerative farming is nuts because it's just how it actually naturally happens, and it doesn't require us buying herbicides, pesticides, fungicides, and all of those companies are the ones that, like the pharmaceutical industries, fund the agriculture colleges where all the farmers are being taught how to farm. And so anyone raises their hand and says like, hey, but what if we do things the natural way? They get demonized. Hi from Sweden. Hello. The house we were staying with Human Garage in Sweden was amazing because it was like an inland of the ocean, and we could go swimming, and the ocean water wasn't completely salty. I eat leafy and seeds and avoid sprouts as they just want to grow up. We should crush instead of cutting. I want to practice semen retention. Any advice? The advice is yes. Experiment. You can also communicate with ayahuasca if you drink the juice, right? Apparently, and I studied heavily into plant medicines, and I'm okay with ayahuasca. I haven't done it. I haven't participated so much in plant medicines. I've read a lot of channeled books written by other entities, either from other planets or other dimensions, or even from this planet that's of a higher level, a higher frequency, that's living currently multiple human lives. And these entities write books. They get channeled through humans that we know about, and they write books. Or there's a book, I've got like several places in my house where I keep the books, but this one's special. It's the Urantia book. It's the size of a Bible. I've tried reading it 3 times now. I cannot get past 10 pages because it's so complex even for me to wrap my head around. And so when I find, and that's happened to me in several books where I'm like, this is a little bit beyond my ability to absorb it. And so I just stop and I come back to it at a later date, thinking that maybe I'll be elevated to that. But the Urantia book just popped up in Chicago like 50 years ago, and nobody knows who wrote it. There's no author. It just started getting publishing. And that book is insane. That book says that we're within a universe within many different levels of universes, and then there's like a super universe that encapsulates all of there's like different stages of universes, and we're like at like 3 or 4 universes within universes within universes of the Godhead universe. And that's where I like to get my information. So instead of plant medicines where we talk directly to earth, directly to the plants. Oh, the whole reason why I brought that up is because in all of these books, there's never anything positive to be said about plant medicines. Essentially, my grasp on it. So there's a paradox for me because they're here for us, right? So I do feel that if we're in alignment with self and we feel the pull, it's hard for me to say that one shouldn't go in that direction. So I would agree that if I even felt the pull towards something, I would likely not question that pull and go with the flow. On the other hand, from an intellectual understanding of it, of me reading these books, which may or may not be for our greatest good, they might just be completely made up. They might just be fiction. Usually every entity, it's not necessary. And at the very least, and at the very most, it could be harmful in the sense that it puts us 20 steps ahead of our own natural progression. And so me coming from a sports background, I view them as like steroids, even though like steroids is kind of like not even a thing. There's types of things that we know of as performance enhancing drugs, but just the concept of steroids is kind of how I view plant medicine. It can push you to a degree, but if your muscles get super, super strong and your tendons and joints aren't there, or if you get super big and jacked and strong and you get pushed into a higher level of league, you might not develop fully as an athlete as if you were to be developing slower and had to match your skills with the lack of strength. So you had to actually come up with the skills necessary to match the strength at that higher level. And so a lot of strength coaches will say that if you start taking steroids in high school, you'll likely make it to college, but that's it. And if you start taking them in college, you'll likely make it to the pros because you'll be that much better than everybody in college who's not taking it. But that's it. And if you wait until you're at a pro level and you start, then you might be like in the top 5%. So it's almost like the longer you wait, the stronger of a foundation you have to then pour juice on top of to amplify your naturally earned strength and skill set. And so that's where I'm at with the plant medicine, is that it's a similar thing. If you do it when you're 18, yeah, it can open your doors of perception and it can teach you a lot of stuff. But what is that on top of? Like, what are you pouring that experience on top of? An 18-year-old's understanding of reality. And we can say the 18-year-olds are amazing and gifted, as they are. But that same 18-year-old at 28 is a completely different person. That same 18-year-old at 48 is a completely more elevated person. Now, the question is, if you do it at 18 and you open those doors, does that allow you to expand to a greater level than if you wouldn't have done it? And then you look at that person at 28, 48, because they did it so young, are they a different person that's changed their life? That's hard to judge because there's so many variables in life. And once again, so with this confusion that's going on in my own mind, I go back to, if you feel the pull in your own self, then that's what matters. Guys, I keep on going over the books and keep on getting questions of the books. This recording will be posted, so you can go back to the very, very beginning and talk about the books, or look at the books. When I try to relax, I see people heaven. I'm going to just fill in the blanks. When I try to relax, I see people in heaven, which is like the I see dead people thing. You can follow Ra at Ra_of_earth. Thank you, Lisa. It can take you to Jupiter and you might not come back. Yeah. And guess what? I know people that can go to Jupiter without the use of plant medicines. So what sort of skill do they have where they don't need the substance? I know people that have worked for governments as remote viewers, and they can go anywhere on the planet and view. They can go off planet and view. I know other people that can go to the Akashic records and view. I'm just reading through some comments. Been missing all you guys. Thank you. All right. The thing is, I've heard another quote, like, when you consume and you get there, it can put you in the room with God, but you don't get to stay there. And so what then? Here's another, and I'm way off topic right now, but here's another, I would say it's close to a worry. Yeah, I would say it's in line with what we know of as fear. DMT is throughout nature everywhere. It's everywhere. And its role is to facilitate connections of essentially the ground's nervous system. So wherever there's a need for more electrical impulses, there's DMT there to facilitate it. So it does open up the mind in the same way. However, the time when DMT gets produced the most, well, the times I should say, number one is it's in the pineal gland, and the pineal gland's very active when you're in a deep restful state, right? We call it REM, rapid eye movement, and it's when we're dreaming, and it's producing visions. And so that's one thing. And another time is at the moment of death. And I know that when I've used cannabis in my life, which I don't anymore, but when I did, it felt like I was in a real dream. And it felt exactly like I was dreaming in this virtual reality where I had access to all of my memories. And they weren't even like, it wasn't even an access to a memory because it wasn't a memory as we know it. It was actually, I became a part of that reality. So I could actually go through time to remember. I became one. That's what member means. It's like, this is a member of my arm. So I could connect with that reality through this substance. But then I quit dreaming. So it was like I was spending whatever, and I know that we do not understand the pineal gland fully of even its scientific chemical compounds. It's not looked into enough in a way that can be displayed for proper understanding. So the dreaming stopped, but then I started thinking, okay, if that's happening, if I'm either taking a lot of exogenous substances like DMT, which I haven't, but if I was, or I was stimulating my body to dump its reserves of psychedelic compounds that gives us that experience, what's going to happen when I die? If I can see that there's a reaction where I spend too much so then I don't dream at night, what happens if I spend my life going into these altered states, dying? Like literally you hear these people saying like, I had an ego death, or I literally died and I became the universe. Okay, awesome. Then you came back, right? Then you came back to this third dimensional space. And what? What do you hear these people say? It took months to start feeling like I was grounded again, or they have to take substances or do practices to get them back into their body. All right, what if we just spent the lifetime of reserves that was saved for the moment of death? Again, this is like on the side of worry. This is my own sort of thought processes of, do I participate in plant medicines or not, which is an amazing conversation. And I'm talking about it just from my own perspective, but like, what happens at the moment of death? Anyways, back to the point though, if you feel called to it, I feel that there's an intelligence that's permeating all of us, that's guiding us. And for whatever reason, I have this viewpoint and I feel called and pulled to this perspective. And so that's what I'm going with. This all shifts when there's a change in the energy flow of the conscious universe. And then I get guided into the right moment in time. So I might have these fears and worries about a thing to stop me from going there now, but maybe when I'm 60, like a psychic said to me once, that opens up. That was a long tangent. Okay, this proves that plants have a much higher consciousness than humans. Really nice that they can do this. Yeah, they're sharing their essence with us. Okay, so what else do plants do that makes it seem like they're aware? I mean, there's things that we all know. No one understands you and your life. It is less fun because you want to go back to that memory of this DMT. All right. When we actually think about like life, right? So you got a plant and it's growing towards the window. If you guys, I have like 100 houseplants. It takes me an hour and a half to water them all every 7 to 10 days. They're doing different things. They're growing towards the light. Some of them would prefer to be growing up, like climbing, as opposed to hanging. So I don't know, you can't really see, but one of these vines behind me does amazing hanging. And then another one, if it's hanging, the leaves are super small. But if the moment you put it climbing up a pole, the leaves like grow like 7 times the size. So it prefers to be climbing. What else do plants do? They reproduce. They also take in more water during different times of the year. They grow thick and high based on the frequencies and spectrums of light that it receives. Plants also fruit. We have like 10 avocado trees in the backyard. Some of them are fruiting right now. You know what's interesting is actually there's only a few out of those 10 that are fruiting this year. I think because whoever was maintaining this property before we got here wasn't really watering the trees. So I think that they're in reserve mode. But the one that's fruiting the most, there's one branch. So we live kind of on a hillside, and then there's the ocean, but we live on a hillside. And so the tree is really low. And so this microphone's the tree. And then there's one branch that comes off, it kind of goes off to the side and it grows really tall. And it's on this one branch that grows up the hillside so that it's like kind of perfect reaching height for us. That has like, we just harvested it a few months ago, and there's 100 more avocados that are like golf ball size right now growing only on this one section of the tree. So what's the tree doing? It's like the whole tree's not fruiting, but there's this taller branch that comes up. Does it know that the animals that are eating the tree is like up there? Maybe it's saying that this other stuff down here isn't getting as much light or nutrition, or maybe it's the direction that the branch is going. Like, I don't know, but there's some sort of choice happening. And then all the other trees, some of them are fruiting, some of them aren't. Avocado trees are insane because they take from seed to fruit 13 years. And actually, to grow a seed is very tricky. There's like a whole huge process you have to go through, even just to get the thing to start sprouting roots. And then it takes 13 years from that point to get to the point where it's giving fruit. And then the fruit doesn't ripen on the tree. You have to pluck it off and let it ripe on your counter, because if you leave it on the tree, it's essentially going to rot. It'll just stay hard until it's inedible. And also, avocados, that word, what does it mean? The word avocado, avocate, I think is what it means. But it actually means testicle, because you actually see it when you take it off the tree. It starts to turn into like a old, wrinkly giant grape looking thing. It kind of looks like really hot, sweaty, old testicles. Have you ever felt a connection with the plant? Share your experience in the comments. Has anybody out there ever felt a connection with a plant? I've shared mine many times, but I like this one story that Dave Sandoval, who owns the Purium company that I work with, he's my business partner. He shares a story of there is some fires by his house. He lives in Central California. So we have fire season in different places in California, but he shares a story about walking down a hill. So there's hot springs by where he lives. I've been there many times, and walking down towards the hot springs and seeing a giant rock with a little tree poking out of it. And it was little, it was fragile. And one day he was walking down and he decided to sit and have a conversation decided to sit underneath a bigger tree, and he saw this little tiny tree that looked like it was starved of nutrients because it was like coming out of a crack of a gigantic rock. And he said that he talked to the tree and just kind of like sympathized with it not being able to get the sunlight because it can't grow as tall as the other trees because it's not getting as much water and dirt, and the other trees around it were getting everything, but this little tiny tree coming out of the rock wasn't. And one year there was a fire and all of the other trees burned down. But because this tree was so separated from the brush and the other trees, because it was in the center of this rock, it was protected. And he had another conversation with the tree then, and the tree was so grateful for this rock. And as he kept on going over the years, the tree broke the rock because its roots grew strong enough. Once all the other trees were clear, it broke the rock. And then now its roots can get into the ground and start growing taller. And just the way that he described how remorseful the tree felt for breaking the rock, which is the whole reason why it survived the fires, is the rock protected it. And because it offered its protection, the tree then had to split the rock in half, a gigantic rock. Anyways, it's an amazing thing to think about, the intelligence that these things have and the connection that they have with each other. And back to the indigenous people, I remember getting taught in school that these people are so stupid. They even think that the rocks are alive. If you think about it, what are we made of? I'm just reading comments. I'll get back to the rock thing. Pine trees help lung health, and I'm sure it helped me shrink my lung tumor. As decided to walk every day for 3 months before the next scan. Yeah. Guys, here's another book, Forest Bathing. Yeah, Forest Bathing is another amazing book about the power of nature. The pine trees, when they're in the springtime, you can look at the ends of them and there's like very fluorescent needles. They're very light green and you can eat those. They taste super good. So next time you guys are walking through a forest in the springtime where there's like all these little shoots coming off the ends of the branches, pick those off and eat it. And just try one if you think that it could hurt you, but it's amazing. They're soft. So it shouldn't be hard like you're trying to chew through it, but it's super soft. I had plant delivered to my hospital room when I gave birth to my youngest son. It's 17 years old now. I've repotted it twice. It just keeps growing. Amazing. Don't trees support each other through the root system? Yes. And you can learn more about that in The Hidden Life of Trees. So if you got a bunch of trees, I think it was the birch tree is the example, is that if you had a bunch of trees, beech tree, I think, not birch, beech tree. And if you have a bunch of trees, and again, I think the reason why this question was asked is because if you have one tree that's smaller and it's not getting access to the light, the other trees will feed that smaller tree nutrients. But in this case, it was like secluded. There was no connection there. My great grandmother plant that my mother had a piece and my sister and I do. My great grandmother's plant is probably what was supposed to be. And the mom had a piece and now the sisters do. And now her children does. Shared by Ellen. That's pretty cool. I mean, what if we start passing down plants as opposed to passing down trinkets like a watch? And the same apples that you enjoyed at your grandmother's house, you have that same apple tree, the same species, the same lineage as your parents' had. Like, we're growing these avocados are the best tasting avocados we had in our entire life. That's why I'm like, know about like growing them from a seed, because we're harvesting them. And we went through a whole bunch of seeds and only got one sprout, but luckily that thing now has leaves and is growing in our kitchen. And I went through 13 at least seeds where I was like, we're gonna have too many trees. Like, I was like, we're gonna have way too many, and I got one out of those. There's still two more that I'm trying to see if they're going to root, but I'm not sure if they're going to. I've been swimming in a local lake 2 to 3 times a week to help ground myself and heal a sprained wrist. Yes. Pine cone honey is amazing. Who is the author of the book? You're going to have to find that out on your own. There is a few titles out there. I thought we made a divine particle that can be found everywhere in the universe. Yeah. We didn't necessarily make it. We found it. And when you look at it, when you actually look at the shape, it looks like the center of a Merkaba. It looks like it can fit inside of this. It actually looks like one section of this. I'm trying to remember. It's been like 12 years, not 12 years, maybe 8 years since I was seeing the actual picture of it. But it looks like a section of this. And this is actually what physicists, when they have a symbol for light, it's a triangle. Or it's not really a triangle. It's an octahedron. It's a triangle on two sides. So the symbol for light is like a pyramid on top of a pyramid, but it's two-dimensional. So it's just like two triangles with the bases touching each other, which is what this is if you take the two triangles and separate them apart. So the knowledge that I have, the gnosis that I have, is that light, when it's traveling, is more separate. It's almost like this shape gets stretched out while the photon is moving. But then light and everything at rest looks like this. This is the center. This is the energetic shape of all that exists. I had the spirit of a plant appear to me when I was babysitting, and it was out of water AS. My mother received the plant when I was born. I don't have the original plant, but I have pieces from that plant that I have kept alive. Amazing. The spirit was sparkling. I think this is the same. So let me continue this. I had the spirit of a plant appear to me when I was babysitting, and it was out of water and looked dead. The spirit was sparkly and the shape of the plant. I watered it and it went back to full health. Oh, so the spirit visited this person, basically saying like, hey, my physical body is dying because there's no water, so please water me. Which is how prayers work, right? So anybody who's religious that are praying, like that's what you're doing. It's the little small cell that you are, the self, is praying to a higher consciousness that is connected to everything. It's so you are a part of that higher consciousness, which is in the religious teachings, right? God is omnipotent, omnipresent, something else, which means all-knowing. It's existed through omni. Let me just reset. Basically, God is all-knowing, all-powerful, and all present, omnipresent. It's permeating through everything. And so when you pray to a God figure, it's because you are a part of the God figure. That's the only way that it's going to work. It's not like the God figure is completely separate than you. That's how we think about it, because we think about ourselves as separate. But that goes back to like plant intelligence and why we're talking about all of this. It's hard for us to imagine the earth being conscious or the universe being conscious, because we think about things as having a brain. And that's why we need a God figure, is because we need there to be a thinking organism that directs intelligence. But when we look into plants, we can see that there's not a part of the plant that is being the director. It is as a whole species making a whole organism making decisions, seemingly with connection to the outside world. There's even plants that know when the sun is going to rise and start orienting its flowers and leaves towards the sunrise. And even if you take that plant and shift it, it's going to start shifting and looking for the plant. There's vines that put out tendrils and they spiral and they're looking for something to grow onto. There's the daughter plant that is is it a parasite? Yeah, it's a parasitic plant. And so it's looking for another plant to stick into and extract nutrients because it doesn't have leaves. And so it's going to, when it starts growing, it literally is like searching around, which direction do I go? Okay, I can sense that there's some chemical compounds that are likely coming from my host plant that way. So it starts growing in that direction. If anyone's owned a house like I have, I remember 21 years old in my backyard digging up a septic pipe. Why? Because a tree. So the why was because none of our toilets were flushing. So then we dig up the whole septic pipe going to the septic system, and there's a root from the tree that's wedged itself into the pipe and broke it open and then shoved all of its roots in there to what? Get the water that's going. Trees can hear water. And what is hearing? It's just sensing vibration, right? But there's studies where trees are played different sounds, one of them being flowing water. And they even know the difference between a speaker playing flowing water and actual flowing water. They have a preference of which way they go. And they're always going to go towards flowing water, especially if it's real flowing water. So anybody that's a plumber knows the difficulty. You can seal the pipes completely. The roots are still going to send a hair-like root. Why? Because it's thinking there's water in there. It's going to send a hair thinner than a hair into a pipe goes like this, right? So you got a small pipe, it goes into a bigger one. So if you send something in a little crack, even though it's completely sealed, that thing's going to go in there. And as the tree is sucking up water and minerals from the rest of the earth, that little piece of thing smaller than a hair is going to get thicker. And it's eventually going to break open the seal, and then it's going to get access to the water. How is it doing that? Just doing that randomly? No, it's not doing that randomly. It's intelligent. It does it with a purpose. So the point here is that our concept of what life is and what intelligence is and what consciousness is from the standpoint of us, where we have a brain. Why do we have a brain? Because we move. So think about moving through life like an animal. We would need things to make fast decisions because we're moving in a quick manner. I can be in 10 seconds in a different room right now. I could be in 10 seconds outside. I can be in 10 seconds in water. That's going to require a whole bunch of adaptations in my body. So with movement, it requires a processing system that is going to be able to manipulate a body that moves. That's the main function of a brain, is that it takes all the resources and it shoves it into a computer system up here that can make computations to keep me alive and to keep me thriving. Think about a plant. It's not moving. The environment around it is doing subtle changes. It's going through cycles. It doesn't make sense to have all of the resources directed into one part of that tree. What if it's in a branch that gets struck by lightning? Now the whole tree dies? That's what happens to us. If we get our head chopped off, we don't really survive that much longer as a physical body. But with a plant, that sort of design doesn't make sense. However, there's still going to be maybe even a greater level of consciousness, of thinking, of self-realization within the plant, because it's been here way longer than we have. And so different species. So when you look at the tree of life, right, you've got like plants, animals, and insects are like a section of the animal species. And then you have like fungus, bacteria is like a whole other thing. They all are thinking and behaving at a level that is far superior to us human beings. Fungus has been shown to be able to outthink us and to figure out mazes better than we can. Things develop differently in those different tree sections. So insects have eyes, but they developed independently than the way that our eyes developed. Meaning there wasn't a eye animal that then separated off into insects with eyes and humans with eyes, or mammals with eyes. No, there was an animal that didn't have eyes. There was a fork, and that fork broke off, and these two different parts of the fork, one evolved into insects, one evolved into mammals, developed eyes independently. That's why they look different. They do different things, but they're still eyes. They sense light, and the insects sense a different spectrum of light. So different organisms have different tools that develop independently of each other, but are useful on planet Earth. Life itself, intelligence, can be one of them. Intelligence in a bacteria. A bacteria is like everywhere. It can survive in any climate. It can survive everywhere. There's a coat of bacteria around the entire Earth. I want to say a few hundred meters underneath the surface, but it might even be 2 miles. I forget. But there's a colony of bacteria that's the size of the surface of the Earth. There's fungus. Plants have intelligence. They have all the markers of intelligence. They make decisions, they reproduce, they are biased towards health, and they go away from pain. They interact with other species. So in that book, Light Eaters, there's an example of bumblebees that if they're a month early before the flowers bloom, the bumblebees will start chomping and letting itself known to the plant. And the plant will know that like, oh, this is my pollinator. I better release my flowers. Otherwise, this pollinator is going to die and I'm not going to get my flowers pollinated. So they will produce flowers up to 30 days ahead of schedule because the bees just nibble on it a little bit and the plant responds to it. This is all important because when we think about what else is there beyond our self, like, is there something that's connecting all of this together? Is the earth conscious? Is the universe conscious? When you look at a tree that has intelligence throughout the entire system, its roots are intelligence. The trunk makes responses based on what the roots are doing. The leaves are intelligent, and you can even shed the leaves and it doesn't lose brain power. In fact, it makes the whole body stronger. If a plant doesn't need a branch, or if it's weighing it down, it'll let it go. It'll shed it. And the tree it keeps its intelligence. There's sense organs throughout the entire tree. It's thinking as an entire organism. Needing a brain is not necessary. And so when I think about the universe as being intelligent, I think about it from the perspective of a plant's form of intelligence, as opposed to thinking about it from our form of intelligence, where I need some sort of figure, which is going to replace our understanding of the brain. I need this figure. I think about it as just like an all unifying force that is thinking. It has an agenda, even if that agenda is to see what it's like to separate itself into an infinite amount of pieces and run it through scenarios and have these little independent pieces not know the difference, not be able to tell its connection. Someone's asking about this hat. Hemp hat made by lions in the zoo is what it says in here. Oh, lionsinthe.zoo.co. Protect your frequency. So I think that's the name of the brand, Lions in the Zoo. So the plant is as old as I am. I am 64 years old. Just reading through some comments. I love and live on a lake. I have been doing the maneuvers in the lake. It's been, yes, now you're adding pressure to your pressurized system. It's been a blast. Plus the workouts are really working out my body with the waves. I wonder if Gary released the workouts. He was working on some top secret workouts that I don't think he released, but maybe he did. Oh, I never thought about that as a prayer. Yeah, that's what a prayer is. Wow, I'm really behind on comments. All right, y'all, I think I've got to end it there. Thanks for everybody's participation. Is that why when an alcoholic has one eye going one way and the other a different way, we kind of being funny, but talking about eyes is interesting. Everything is connected and conscious, a giant web like mycelium. Modern humans have just lost the sense that we're a part of it. Yep, exactly. With them blocking the sun with my tree grow moss on. I just flew all through Europe. So I was in the airplane like every 3 days, and the amount of coverage that you can see from an airplane, it's like there's a mist or a fog everywhere that's reflecting light out, which is amazing. They're just trying to do everything they can to stop the ascension from happening, but it's happening. I never really thought about that, but after the topic, all right, really glad to be able to listen to you. Thanks, everybody. Reach out if you have any other amazing topics you think that I should be covering. Until next time, ta-ta.